Perfect. Okay, I would like to introduce myself, also the game and some other information. Well, the game I chose is the fishing game. I think that's a great game, especially politicians should play much more. And some more things, Birgit also said it. I'm the academic director of the Center for Management Simulation in Stuttgart, and some things connected with it is, well, on the left-hand side, that's a research project we are doing at the moment with Tobias, a PhD student, and in 2025 the ISAGA conference will be in Stuttgart, so we welcome you all to Stuttgart next year. And as far as I know, maybe you have other information, but I don't think so. In 2025 we will have the first time a Global Simulation and Gaming Award, so an award for master and bachelor thesis on the one hand and PhD thesis on the other hand, dealing with simulation and gaming. And we welcome all of you who have written such a paper on the one hand, or who know something, who wrote a paper, bachelor, master thesis or PhD thesis, to hand in your papers from the last 3.5 years, till, and the deadline is end of September, so you don't have too much time, but it would be a pleasure. And we have a very high ranked jury, so Toshiko from Japan is in the jury, Billy from Austria, Heide from New Zealand, Elizabeth from Australia, and several more people. So I think that's a great new thing in the simulation and gaming community. Thank you, Willie. And now I hope, that is,
PowerPoint?
Yeah, I have it here on the screen.
On the bottom.
But not Bildschirm Präsentation. Okay.
Ich muss jetzt alle mal ein bisschen beeilen, weil die Zeit.
Okay. Okay. Coming after Elizabeth, Toshiko, Mieko, and Bibi, it's quite difficult to present something. And, well, what I want to present is only a little study we attached to the big PhD program of Tobias, and with a small group, as that connected with the others. So the impact of motivation and playfulness on the facilitation of simulation games. And the background, well, motivation seems to be quite clear. It's important for learning. Learning is a self-motivated process. In simulation game courses, motivation might be of a special interest because the activity is more on the participant's side and not on the side of the lecturer. And in addition, what we wanted to see is whether playfulness in general have influence on the facilitation of gaming, simulation games, or whether it fits for all people, neither without thinking about how playful they are. So we have 4 research questions, and I will come back to each of the questions on the following slides, so I don't want to read them at this point. Well, in general, yes, which components of motivation are important and whether playfulness is important. The research methodology, it's an quantitative empirical study. We based this study on 3 different questionnaires. So there is a questionnaire by Reinberg, that's a questionnaire on current motivation on the one hand side. Then playfulness, we took a questionnaire of Breuer on playfulness in adulthood. Then the third questionnaire is our own questionnaire from our Simulation and Gaming Center, which is from the PhD thesis of Tobias, that measures a lot of aspects of simulation games in general. And we took the share price data as in-game data from the simulation game we use. We based the study on Top Sim General Management. That's a simulation game that where the participants simulate as heads heads of the company, as directors of the company, and they have to manage the companies with a lot of different aspects, from cost accounting, marketing, purchasing, human resources, and so on. So it's a simulation game that covers different areas of companies. And they play in teams of typically 3 to 5, 6 participants, and they compete with the companies managed by the other students. Well, what did we get as results? One point was how are different components of motivation developing over the course of the seminar. So we had in altogether 4 points when we measured motivation and other data, so 3 times motivation, and then at the end was our own questionnaire. And altogether we can see a tendency, a positive development. So the fear to fail is decreasing maybe a little bit. That is certainly not significant, but stays roughly the same. And the number of participants, well, I missed that, was quite low. So it was only, we have the whole study is about roughly 5,000 participants, but for this special study we have only 3 simulation games with I think roughly 40 participants, 49 participants altogether, but also not at all times we measured the data. Well, and the other 3 components of motivation, they increase slightly, so it gets a little bit better over the course of the seminar. It was a scale from 1 to 6, 1 the worst and 6 the best. Then we looked on what is the relationship between individual components of motivation and the progress and results of the simulation game. Well, we see that motivation has no impact on the share price. That seems to be quite logical, because the share price is measured on the group-wise, and individual motivation is not responsible for it. And the share price, and that's quite good from our perspective, has quite little influence. It influences motivation, but it's not a strong indicator of motivation. So in general, it doesn't matter whether a company is very good from the share price or quite bad from the share price. There's no big influence on the motivation. It would be quite bad if a bad share price would lead to a bad motivation, because then we would lose, or the risk would be to lose the students in the seminar. And what we also see, that the individual components of motivation measured at the beginning have a quite strong influence on learning and satisfaction at the end, measured at the end of the simulation game. So we see that motivated students learn more, measured in self-reports, so not on an objective basis. We'll come later on to this point. And the satisfaction is higher if the students are motivated at the beginning. The third question was, what is the relationship between the question on motivation in our own inventory and the questionnaire of current motivation? So from our point, that is very positive, that we have significant correlation. So we can see that our own question relates to the probability of success and interest. So our own question, we measure interest with our short questionnaire with one question, that there is a significant correlation, and that we obviously measure not fear of failure or challenge, but that we measure the probability of success and interest with our question. And the fourth question now on playfulness is, we can see indeed no significant correlation between playfulness, measured with the standard questionnaire, and a single motivation scale of the questionnaire on current motivation. That is 1 point. And we can see no correlation to any of the scales of our own questionnaire. And from our point, that is a positive result, because it doesn't matter whether the participants see themselves as playful or not playful. So it fits for all kinds of participants. And we had the same result when we developed our questionnaire. We had one question on playfulness. We invented this question ourselves, and we couldn't see any connection, and we thought, well, could that really be the case, or is our question maybe not good enough? Yeah. And now with this study and with the standard questionnaire on playfulness, we also can't see any connection. So, it's, as far as we can say, not important whether they are playful and they like playing other games, but that it fits for all. Well, what are the limitations? We have only 3 simulation game seminars and 1 simulation game, only TopSim General Management for the study, because the design of the study is a little bit more complex than our standard questionnaire. It's a 5-minute questionnaire at the end, and this time 3-4 points, and we have to connect the data and so on. So we had only a small or 3 small groups. The participants, the number of participants was small, and it was changing in between. So in between time 2 and time 3, we didn't get all answers. And based largely on self-perception of the students, although we have several indicators that the self-perception is not too bad, let's say in this way. So we know that the facilitators have, that we have significant correlations between what the facilitators realize and what the participants realize from our huge study. And we also see that the participants are able to judge how good, let's say, the facilitators are. So if the facilitators are experienced, and if the facilitators say for themselves, well, I'm safe with this game, then the students rate the facilitator in a better way. So we have some indicators that the perception of the students is okay, but it's the self-concept, self-measurement. And well, and lowly in parts, we have this in this questionnaire quite low rates of internal consistencies, the alpha values well, we have several scales with only 2 items, 2 questions, and part of them are good, but parts of them are quite low. Yes, so far, and yeah, thank you for your attention. Now I'm looking forward to your questions.
There's 2 minutes left for questions. There are a lot, so we start with Murray, Toshiko, and Alex.
Okay.
Thank you, Friedrich. I just wanted to ask you that you have said that you were talking about the impact, and somehow it seems for me that you talked about it in a way that you think that there is a causal relationship, cause and effect, but you have presented correlations. So how can you, from correlations, get to some kind of knowledge how A is an impact for B? So I do not understand it from the methodology point of view.
So if we had the motivation, for example, at the beginning,
yes,
then it's well, it seems to be logic that not the share price from the end influences the motivation at the beginning, for example. So yes, we have several points, and well, the earlier.
But the share point was only measured in the end, or also in every round?
In every round. Yes.
So the correlation is coming from every round, right?
No, we have the motivation at the beginning.
Yes.
We have it in between also, yeah. But we have the motivation also in between, yes, and we can see whether it influences the share price later on, or what's more important, whether the share price influences the motivation to a later point.
Okay.
So I think in this case we can only be the one
okay.
Side. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, but these are quite. You shouldn't hang it too high, of course.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, my question is very technical question. You didn't find any motivational changes, significant changes.
Yeah.
What is the interval of the time T1, T2, T3?
Why?
It's time interval.
Yeah, time.
The time interval.
Yes,
not
it's
roughly-
first,
Yeah.
and it is again the game. And
Yeah.
T. When did you measure
Yeah.
T2?
Yeah. Okay, roughly 1 day later. So it is a 3-day
Ah.
simulation game, and we have T1 before beginning with the simulation game, and right at the beginning of the whole course,
Yeah.
before the briefing,
Yeah.
and then we have after the second round, we had so that was at the beginning of the second day. We had the second measurement, and on the third day we had the third measurement.
So I have an impression that if you measure the motivation 1 week later,
No. Okay, no, it's a 3-day.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the question. Yeah, I kept it quite short, all the things around. It is a 3-day simulation game with 25 lecturing hours, and yeah, the motivation is measured 3 times, every day once.
Thank you.
And so sorry. Somebody else?
Yes, just to this. It's going.
Yeah, it has partly to do with your question. Was there a measurement after the debriefing as well?
After the debriefing, after we have in between debriefings after each period.
Yeah.
So we always discuss half an hour roughly after.
No,
each
but
period.
after the
Totally after
total
the game.
debriefing in the end of the game.
The last
afterwards.
Yeah, the last questionnaire is before the final debriefing, because our
Okay.
experience is to have it absolutely at the end. So say everything's yeah, and then to ask the students to fill in the questionnaire. That doesn't work so well, and therefore we make it usually before the last debriefing. But the last debriefing in this game, at least, is, that's from my perspective at least, not the most important, because we have 5 in between debriefings. And the last one is not longer than the debriefing
Okay,
before.
thank you.
And we know it's better for the motivation for the students to fill in the questionnaire than to do it after the last debriefing.
Especially the question about motivation.
Well, the last.
I don't want
Okay,
to do
you
that.
can discuss it later, but we have just the last
the last one was not about motivation.
That's okay.
Because,
That was a joke.
So,
Thanks for your presentation. I think the aspect of playfulness is very interesting, and the result as well. And how many game elements are in the simulation game? That might depend. Are there a lot of random or throwing dice? And if there are more of these elements, they could be different.
Okay, very interesting. So for the future to look at that, with Topsim General Management, there are no dices or no random elements.
Yeah.
Well, they are competing with the other companies. So they don't know in advance what the other companies do in the current period. Yeah, so they don't know whether the other companies rise or lower the price, for example. So that's a kind of uncertainty for each team, of course. Like in reality, a company doesn't know what the other company will do in the next year. So I think that represents reality, but there's no random elements in this game.
So that might be different for simulation game more randomly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Could be totally different. Yeah. That's only for this game.
It would be also interesting that this competition orientation of people, if they like, of those people like this simulation game more than others, like a cooperative oriented.
So in the other studies, but we don't have questions about motivation. Yeah, we have indeed several thousand data sets and can compare 30 different simulation games. Yeah, I mean that's really what was interesting for us. But in this small study, we took only one simulation game. But that's a good point. Of course, playfulness could have another role in another importance in other games. Thank you for the question.